In an alarming twist of human psychology, studies reveal that up to 70 of all violent crimes are committed by someone the victim knows, shattering the illusion that danger always lurks in the shadows of strangers. This chilling statistic underscores a fundamental truth about trust: its profound capacity to be manipulated, twisted, and ultimately weaponized into the most insidious of traps. Today, we delve into a narrative that perfectly encapsulates this harrowing reality, a case that shook the foundations of a seemingly tranquil community, exposing the brittle veneer of modern relationships and the darkness that can fester beneath the surface of profound confidence. Our story begins not in the grimy underbelly of a metropolis, but amidst the serene, almost idyllic landscape of Crestwood Heights, a prosperous residential enclave famed for its meticulously manicured lawns, robust community watch programs, and an unspoken agreement among its inhabitants that such a place was impenetrable to the harsh realities of the wider world. It was a place where children played freely on tree-lined streets, where neighbors exchanged pleasantries over picket fences, and where the most significant daily worry often revolved around the rising cost of organic produce. Within this picture-perfect setting lived the Millers, David and Sarah, a couple whose lives were the very embodiment of the Crestwood dream. David, a successful architect whose designs graced some of the city's most prestigious buildings, exuded an air of quiet competence and understated charm. Sarah, an accomplished interior designer, was known for her vivacious spirit and an innate ability to make any space feel like home. Their two children, Emily, a bright-eyed teenager on the cusp of university, and young Thomas, a boisterous 10-year-old with an infectious laugh, completed the tableau of a quintessential American family. They were, by all accounts, pillars of their community, active in local charities, regular attendees at neighborhood events, and admired by almost everyone who knew them. Their lives were an open book, or so it seemed, filled with the predictable rhythms of family life, professional success, and social engagement. The Millers' close circle included a man named Mark Jensen, a charismatic real estate developer who had moved to Crestwood Heights 3 years prior. Jensen, with his impeccably tailored suits and a smile that could disarm a jury, quickly integrated himself into the social fabric of the community. He was a master networker, always present at the right events, always offering a helping hand, and always ready with a witty anecdote. He and David Miller had initially bonded over a shared passion for classic cars and ambitious architectural projects. Their professional synergy soon spilled into their personal lives, with Mark becoming a regular fixture at the Miller household, sharing weekend barbecues, holiday dinners, and even vacation plans. Sarah, initially cautious of Mark's almost too perfect demeanor, had slowly warmed to him, appreciating his attentiveness to her children and his genuine interest in their lives. Emily and Thomas looked up to Uncle Mark, who often brought them thoughtful gifts and engaged them in lively conversations, a stark contrast to their father's more reserved nature. He was, to all appearances, a trusted confidant, a loyal friend, a surrogate family member. The foundation of this trust, however, was built on a deceptive premise, meticulously constructed brick by brick over countless interactions. Mark Jensen, unbeknownst to anyone in Crestwood Heights, harbored a deep-seated financial desperation, an abyss masked by his outwardly opulent lifestyle. His real estate ventures, far from the booming successes he publicly proclaimed, were teetering on the brink of catastrophic failure. A series of ill-advised investments, coupled with an insatiable appetite for high-stakes gambling, had left him in a labyrinth of debt, with creditors circling like vultures. He was living a carefully orchestrated lie, each lavish dinner and designer suit a prop in a meticulously crafted charade designed to maintain an illusion of prosperity. The Millers, with their comfortable wealth and David's high-profile architectural contracts, represented not just friends, but a potential lifeline, a source of rescue from the financial precipice he was rapidly approaching. This realization, a cold, calculating assessment, began to warp his perception of their friendship, twisting affection into a resource to be exploited. The first subtle threads of his plan began to unravel during a casual conversation over an expensive bottle of wine at the Millers' home. David, relaxed and expansive, had proudly mentioned a large, impending payment from a major city development project, a sum that would soon be deposited into their joint account. He spoke of investing a portion of it, perhaps renovating their lake house, or even putting it aside for Emily's future education abroad. Mark listened intently, his gaze unwavering, every word David uttered etched into his memory. He offered seemingly innocuous advice, casually suggesting different investment avenues, subtly probing for details about their banking arrangements, their security protocols, their general financial habits. David, completely oblivious to the predatory undertones, saw it merely as the well-intentioned counsel of a financially savvy friend. Sarah, however, felt a flicker of unease, a fleeting impression that Mark's questions were a little too pointed, a little too precise for a casual chat. She dismissed it quickly, attributing it to her own overactive imagination, a natural protectiveness towards her family's privacy. Over the next few weeks, Mark intensified his efforts to gather information. He would drop by unannounced, offering to help David with minor home repairs, lingering near David's home office, casually observing the documents on his desk, the open laptop screens, the financial statements that sometimes lay carelessly exposed. He paid close attention to the family's schedule, noting when David was away on business trips, when Sarah took the children to their extracurricular activities, when the house would be empty. He learned the alarm codes, the location of the spare keys, the blind spots in their security camera system, all under the guise of friendly assistance or shared domestic tasks. He'd helped David install a new smart home system, effortlessly gaining access to its control panel, ostensibly to ensure its proper functioning. David, trusting implicitly, had handed over passwords and administrative rights without a second thought. Sarah, observing this growing reliance, felt a prickle of discomfort, a sense that Mark was becoming almost too involved in their lives, but again, she suppressed the feeling, rationalizing it as Mark's inherent helpfulness. The insidious nature of this infiltration lay in its gradual, almost imperceptible progression, cloaked in the warmth of friendship and the veneer of neighborly assistance. Each piece of information, no matter how trivial it seemed in isolation, was a vital component in the elaborate trap he was meticulously setting. The plan coalesced around David's upcoming business trip to Singapore, a crucial week-long conference that would take him thousands of miles away. Mark knew this was his window, the perfect confluence of opportunity and reduced risk. He had subtly encouraged David to take the trip, even suggesting specific flight times and hotel arrangements, all the while feigning genuine excitement for David's professional advancement. The significant payment David had mentioned was due to be deposited into their account during this precise week. Mark envisioned a scenario where he could access their funds, divert a substantial amount, and then make it appear as if the money had simply vanished, perhaps due to a sophisticated cyber attack or an internal banking error, something untraceable. He had spent countless hours researching methods of digital money laundering, studying the vulnerabilities of online banking systems, and developing a sophisticated scheme that would leave no discernible digital footprint leading back to him. His expertise in technology, previously dismissed as a casual hobby, was now being honed into a sharp, destructive tool. The day David departed for Singapore, a palpable sense of unease settled over the Miller household, though its source was nebulous and unidentifiable. Sarah felt a peculiar stillness in the air, a quiet dread that she couldn't articulate. Mark, meanwhile, was a picture of calm reassurance, stopping by with a casserole and offering to help Sarah with anything she might need while David was away. He played with Thomas in the backyard, helped Emily with a complex math problem, and generally enveloped the family in an aura of protective friendliness. His performance was flawless, a chilling testament to his psychological cunning. He observed their routines, noting the exact time Sarah left for her yoga class, when Emily went to her debate club, and when Thomas was at soccer practice. He knew the house would be empty for a crucial window of 2 hours on Tuesday afternoon, a perfect, unmangled opportunity. Tuesday arrived, cloaked in an overcast sky that seemed to mirror Sarah's lingering anxiety. After dropping Thomas off at soccer practice and Emily at a friend's house for a study group, Sarah headed to her yoga studio, leaving the house empty, precisely as Mark had anticipated. He had been watching from his car, parked discreetly down the street, for the past hour. The moment Sarah's car pulled out of the driveway, he initiated his move. He approached the house not as a stealthy intruder, but as a familiar visitor. Using the spare key he knew was hidden under a specific garden gnome, a detail he had learned months ago during a casual conversation about home security, he let himself in. There was no forced entry, no broken locks, nothing to suggest a typical burglary. He moved through the house with practiced ease, directly to David's home office. He was intimately familiar with the layout, having spent countless hours there with David, discussing projects, sharing ideas. His objective was clear: gain access to David's primary computer and their banking information. He knew David's password, a date of sentimental value that Mark had cleverly extracted during a friendly chat about anniversaries. With a few swift keystrokes, he bypassed the login screen. He navigated directly to the bank's online portal, the very same one David had shown him weeks prior, boasting about its user-friendly interface. The large payment David had anticipated had indeed landed in their account, a substantial sum that made Mark's breath catch in his throat. His heart pounded, a primal mix of fear and exhilaration. This was it. The moment of truth. He initiated the transfer, a multi-layered transaction designed to funnel the money through several intermediary accounts in different offshore locations, making it exceptionally difficult to trace. He had planned this for months, meticulously studying the loopholes in international banking regulations. His fingers flew across the keyboard, executing a ballet of digital theft. He drained a significant portion of their savings, leaving just enough behind to not immediately raise alarm, a calculated move to buy himself time. Before leaving, Mark went a step further, a chilling display of his meticulous deception. He planted a sophisticated piece of malware on David's computer, designed to mimic the patterns of a highly advanced phishing scam or a state-sponsored cyber attack. This was his contingency, his insurance policy. If the bank traced the funds, the malware would suggest David himself had inadvertently fallen victim to a sophisticated online fraud, diverting suspicion away from anyone local. He also subtly rearranged a few items in the office, creating just enough disarray to suggest a hurried, professional hack rather than a calm, premeditated act by someone familiar with the home. He wiped his digital footprints, cleared the browsing history, and removed any trace of his presence on the computer. Then, with the same casual ease with which he entered, he let himself out, replacing the spare key, leaving no discernible physical evidence of his visit. He returned to his own home, heart still racing, but a sense of perverse triumph washing over him. The trap was sprung. Sarah returned home later that afternoon, oblivious to the invisible violation that had occurred within her sanctuary. The house felt exactly as she had left it, the lingering scent of her morning coffee still in the air. She went about her routine, preparing dinner, helping Thomas with his homework, calling Emily to check on her study session. David called from Singapore that evening, his voice a little strained by the time difference, but otherwise cheerful. He mentioned checking their bank account, noting that the large payment had indeed come through. "We're set, darling," he said, "future looks bright." Sarah smiled, her earlier unease momentarily forgotten in the warmth of his words. The calm before the storm. The storm broke 2 days later. David, trying to make an online payment for Emily's university application, found his access to their joint account blocked. He tried several times, growing increasingly frustrated. He called the bank's customer service, initially assuming a technical glitch. The conversation that followed, however, sent a jolt of icy dread through him. The bank representative informed him that a substantial amount of money, almost 2/3 of their liquid assets, had been transferred out of their account via a series of highly unusual transactions, originating from their home IP address, just 2 days prior. The representative also mentioned suspicious activity consistent with malware on their primary device. David's mind reeled. He vehemently denied initiating any such transfers, his voice rising in alarm. He immediately called Sarah, his voice laced with panic. Someone's drained our accounts, Sarah. Most of it's gone. Sarah, at home, felt her world tilt. The chilling unease she had suppressed for weeks resurfaced with brutal clarity. She rushed to David's office, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. The bank advised them to contact the police immediately and to not touch the computer until forensic experts could examine it. The initial shock quickly gave way to a sickening sense of betrayal. Who could have done this? Who knew their routines, their finances, their passwords? The list of suspects was terrifyingly short. The arrival of the police, led by the astute detective Inspector Anya Sharma, shattered the tranquil facade of Crestwood Heights. Sharma was a seasoned veteran, her sharp eyes missing nothing, her analytical mind piecing together disparate fragments of evidence with remarkable speed. She listened patiently as David and Sarah recounted the events, their voices thick with disbelief and anguish. David, initially convinced it was a random, sophisticated cyber attack, emphasized his careful digital hygiene. Sarah, however, found her mind drifting back to Mark Jensen. His overly precise questions, his constant presence, the feeling of subtle intrusion she had dismissed, it all began to click into a horrifying pattern. She hesitated for a moment, then, driven by an instinct she could no longer ignore, brought up Mark's name. He was so involved, she explained, he knew everything about our finances, our schedules, he even helped David set up the new smart home system. David, though initially defensive of his friend, listened intently, a seed of doubt beginning to sprout in his mind. Detective Sharma noted Sarah's observations with keen interest. Experience had taught her that the most damaging betrayals often came from within trusted circles. The lack of forced entry, the sophisticated nature of the digital crime, the precise timing, it all pointed towards an insider. The forensic team meticulously examined David's computer, confirming the presence of the advanced malware and the meticulously erased digital footprints. They also discovered a faint, almost imperceptible trace of a unique, high-performance cleaning agent on the keyboard and mouse, a chemical signature that didn't match any of the miller's usual cleaning products. This small detail would prove to be crucial. Detective Sharma's investigation quickly turned its focus to Mark Jensen. She authorized a background check, which immediately flagged red. Mark's financial records were a labyrinth of shell companies, defaulted loans, and spiraling debts, a stark contrast to his public image. His real estate empire was a house of cards, on the verge of collapse. This provided a powerful motive. Sharma also discovered that Mark had recently purchased a specialized, high-grade cleaning solution from a niche online vendor, the very same type whose trace elements were found on David's computer peripherals. The coincidence was too significant to ignore. A surveillance team was dispatched to monitor Mark's activities. They observed him making frantic phone calls, meeting with shady individuals in obscure locations, and showing clear signs of extreme stress, despite his efforts to maintain a composed demeanor. He frequently visited high-end casinos, his gambling addiction evidently spiraling out of control, a clear indication of his continued desperation. Sharma knew she needed more than circumstantial evidence, she needed irrefutable proof. She decided on a risky but potentially decisive move, a covert search warrant for Mark's residence and his electronic devices. The legal team worked quickly, building a robust case based on the financial irregularities, the malware evidence, and the growing pattern of suspicious behavior. Armed with the warrant, a team of officers executed the search. Mark Jensen was found in his opulent living room, seemingly engrossed in a financial newspaper, his usual facade of calm firmly in place. However, as officers began their systematic search, his composure began to fray. In his study, hidden behind a loose panel in his desk, forensic experts discovered a secondary laptop. This laptop, unlike his primary, was meticulously wiped of most data, but deep within its archived files, cyber forensics specialists uncovered the encrypted logs of the fraudulent transfers. The IP addresses, though masked and routed through multiple proxies, eventually led back to Mark's home network, a crucial slip-up he had believed untraceable. Furthermore, they found a detailed, encrypted spreadsheet outlining his debts, his gambling losses, and, chillingly, a projected repayment schedule that ominously correlated with the exact amount stolen from the Millers. The cleaning agent discovered on David's computer was also found in Mark's cleaning supplies, a distinct, expensive brand he favored. The evidence was overwhelming. Confronted with the undeniable truth, Mark Jensen's carefully constructed world crumbled. He initially maintained his innocence, attempting to portray himself as a victim of a larger conspiracy, weaving an intricate web of lies. But as Detective Sharma presented him with each piece of irrefutable evidence, the financial records, the network logs, the unique cleaning agent, the desperate spreadsheet, his bravado dissolved. His face, once so smooth and confident, crumpled into a mask of defeat. He confessed, his voice barely a whisper, detailing the intricate planning, the calculated exploitation of trust, the desperation that had driven him to commit such a heinous act against his supposed friends. He spoke of the suffocating pressure of debt, the lure of easy money, and the twisted logic that convinced him the Millers would hardly miss such a sum, given their vast wealth. He acknowledged the satisfaction he felt in outsmarting David, whom he secretly envied. The betrayal was complete, and its architect stood exposed. The news of Mark Jensen's arrest reverberated through Crestwood Heights like a seismic shockwave. The idyllic community, once so secure in its perceived invulnerability, was forced to confront the dark reality that evil could wear a friendly face, could sit at your dinner table, could be the person you entrusted with your children. Neighbors huddled in disbelief, their conversations punctuated by gasps of shock and whispers of "I always thought there was something off about him." For the Millers, the arrest brought a hollow sense of justice, but it did little to heal the gaping wound of betrayal. The financial loss, though substantial, was almost secondary to the emotional devastation. Their trust, once an unwavering anchor, was shattered, leaving them adrift in a sea of suspicion and doubt. Sarah found herself questioning every past interaction, every shared laugh, every seemingly innocuous conversation with Mark. David wrestled with an agonizing self-reproach, blaming himself for his naivety, for not seeing the signs, for failing to protect his family. The children, particularly Emily, struggled to comprehend how Uncle Mark, a figure of warmth and generosity, could morph into a cold-hearted thief. Their innocence had been irrevocably tainted. The subsequent trial of Mark Jensen was a high-profile spectacle, drawing extensive media coverage. The prosecution meticulously laid out the damning evidence, painting a vivid picture of a calculated, premeditated crime driven by greed and desperation. David and Sarah testified, their voices wavering with emotion as they recounted the insidious erosion of their trust. Detective Sharma presented her findings with clinical precision, her testimony illuminating the intricate details of Jensen's digital infiltration and financial fraud. Jensen's defense, flimsy and desperate, attempted to portray him as a man driven to the brink by unforeseen circumstances, a victim of his own poor choices rather than a malicious perpetrator. But the evidence, and the sheer audacity of his betrayal, spoke volumes. The jury, after a swift deliberation, found Mark Jensen guilty on all counts of fraud, theft, and cybercrime. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, a just punishment for the extensive damage he had inflicted, both financial and psychological. In the aftermath, the Millers embarked on a long and arduous journey of healing. The financial recovery was slow, but with the support of their bank and the tireless efforts of their legal team, they began the arduous process of recovering a portion of what was lost. The bank, acknowledging the sophistication of Jensen's attack and their long-standing relationship with the Millers, extended certain concessions and assistance, helping them to navigate the labyrinthine legal and financial pathways. However, the emotional toll proved far more difficult to quantify, let alone repair. The meticulously maintained facade of Crestwood Heights had been irrevocably cracked, revealing the unsettling truth that even in the most protected enclaves, the seeds of malevolence could sprout and flourish within the guise of friendship. For Sarah, the betrayal manifested as a constant, low-level hum of anxiety beneath the surface of her daily life. Every new acquaintance was viewed through a prism of suspicion, every friendly gesture dissected for hidden motives. The open, trusting nature she once possessed, a cornerstone of her vivacious personality, had been replaced by a wary reserve. She found herself replaying conversations with Mark, searching for missed cues, for the telltale signs she had so innocently overlooked. The memory of his infectious laugh, his thoughtful gifts to the children, the way he would lean in conspiratorially during a shared anecdote, these moments, once cherished, now felt like phantom limbs, grotesque reminders of a trust that had been violated. She struggled with acute self-blame, a debilitating narrative that told her she should have known, should have protected her family better. This self-reproach often kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling, re-evaluating every fleeting intuition she had dismissed. Her work as an interior designer, which once brought her immense joy and a sense of creative flow, now felt tainted. The concept of making a house a home felt ironic, a cruel joke, when her own sanctuary had been so utterly breached. She started seeing the flaws, the potential vulnerabilities, in every design, every security system, every human interaction. David, meanwhile, retreated further into himself, his quiet competence giving way to a profound melancholia. The architectural projects that once fueled his passion now seemed mundane, almost meaningless, in the face of such a deeply personal loss. The loss of money was painful, yes, but the loss of his reputation, or more accurately, his self-perception of being a shrewd and discerning man, cut far deeper. He felt a profound sense of humiliation, a sting of foolishness for having been so easily duped by someone he considered a brother. The image of Mark, the charismatic friend, flickered in his mind, often juxtaposed with the cold, calculating thief described in court. The cognitive dissonance was almost unbearable. He questioned his judgment, not just in friendship, but in his professional life too. His natural reserve intensified, becoming a barrier against further emotional injury. He struggled to connect with Sarah, fearing her unspoken judgment, and often found solace only in the solitary pursuit of his work, burying himself in blueprints and calculations, anything to avoid the uncomfortable silence that now often permeated their home. The children bore their own silent scars. Thomas, still young, was confused and angry. He couldn't reconcile the Uncle Mark who taught him how to play chess with the villain depicted in newspaper headlines. He became withdrawn, less boisterous, often asking probing questions about why people hurt each other, questions that Sarah and David found heartbreakingly difficult to answer. Emily, on the cusp of adulthood, wrestled with a more complex trauma. Her plans for studying abroad were now uncertain, a painful reminder of the financial hit. More importantly, the experience instilled in her a cynical view of human nature. The world, which she once viewed as a place of opportunity and inherent goodness, now seemed fraught with hidden dangers, even among those closest to you. Her trust in authority figures, in the established order of her community, was shaken. She struggled with friendships, often suspecting ulterior motives, a subtle paranoia taking root where once there was open acceptance. The family dinners, once vibrant with laughter and shared stories, now often descended into quiet, almost strained affairs, the ghost of Mark Jensen an invisible, unwelcome guest. Crestwood Heights itself underwent a subtle but significant transformation. The meticulously manicured lawns remained, the community watch programs continued, but an intangible layer of innocence had been stripped away. Neighbors no longer exchanged pleasantries with the same unburdened ease. A quiet undercurrent of suspicion permeated social gatherings. The narrative of Crestwood Heights as an impenetrable bubble of safety had been shattered. People began to install more robust security systems, update their alarm codes, and scrutinize new residents with a newfound vigilance. The unspoken agreement that had once defined their community was replaced by a more cynical understanding. Danger did not always arrive heralded by sirens or shadowed figures. Sometimes, it walked through the front door, invited in by trust. The Millers, once pillars of this community, now found themselves subtly isolated. While outwardly sympathetic, some neighbors privately wondered if David and Sarah had been too trusting, too careless. This unintended ostracization added another layer to their already profound grief. Detective Inspector Anya Sharma, whose meticulous work brought Jensen to justice, found herself reflecting on the case long after the headlines faded. It reinforced her belief that true crime often wasn't about the grand, theatrical schemes of fiction, but about the slow, insidious erosion of trust in everyday lives. She understood that while the law offered restitution and punishment, it rarely offered true healing. Her team had secured a conviction, but the ripple effects of Jensen's actions would continue to echo through the Miller family and Crestwood Heights for years to come. The case became a benchmark in her own personal understanding of human malevolence, the way desperation could twist a person's moral compass, turning friends into prey, and how the most dangerous weapons were often not blades or guns, but the carefully cultivated bonds of human connection. Several months later, the Millers were still grappling with the fallout. They had managed to recover about 40 of their stolen funds, a testament to the tenacity of their legal team and the bank's belated efforts, but the remaining deficit loomed large. Emily's university plans were altered, her dream of studying abroad replaced by a more pragmatic choice of a local institution, a compromise she accepted with a quiet resignation that broke her parents' hearts. Thomas started seeing a child psychologist, struggling to process the trauma of betrayal. Sarah, trying to reclaim some semblance of control, threw herself into advocating for stricter online banking security protocols and educating others about the subtle signs of financial predation. She gave talks at community centers, sharing her family's painful story, hoping to prevent others from falling victim to similar schemes. Her vivacious spirit, though tempered, began to re-emerge, not in its former carefree form, but as a more resilient, determined force. She learned to channel her anxiety into proactive measures, a coping mechanism that slowly started to rebuild her fractured sense of purpose. David, however, remained profoundly scarred. The humiliation festered, occasionally erupting in short, sharp bursts of anger directed at himself or, sometimes, unfairly, at Sarah for having ever expressed that initial flicker of unease, as if acknowledging it earlier would have prevented the tragedy. Their marriage, once a beacon of stability, now navigated rougher waters, punctuated by unspoken resentments and the heavy silence of shared trauma. They attended counseling, slowly, painstakingly, beginning to unpack the layers of grief, blame, and fear. The therapist helped them understand that the betrayal was not a reflection of their own failures, but of Mark Jensen's deep-seated pathology. It was a long, arduous process, forcing them to confront not only the perpetrator's actions but their own reactions to them, their vulnerability, and the difficult task of re-establishing trust in a world that had shown them its darker side. One afternoon, almost a year after Jensen's arrest, Sarah found herself in David's home office, a space that still held a faint, unsettling echo of the violation. She was searching for an old photo album, a task that required her to sift through boxes of documents and memorabilia. Hidden beneath a stack of David's old architectural drawings, she found a small, leather-bound journal. It was David's, a private space where he occasionally jotted down thoughts and ideas, something she rarely, if ever, looked at, respecting his privacy. But this time, a morbid curiosity, coupled with the lingering need for answers, compelled her. She opened it, her fingers tracing the familiar lines of his handwriting. The early entries detailed his excitement about Crestwood Heights, his hopes for their family, his growing friendship with Mark. He wrote of Mark's charm, his generosity, their shared dreams of building a better community. Then, the tone shifted. Subtle doubts began to appear, almost imperceptibly at first. An entry dated a few weeks before the theft read, Mark's questions about the payment felt off. Like he was studying me. Probably my imagination. He's a friend. Another, closer to David's departure for Singapore, he's been around a lot. Maybe a little too much? Sarah seems uneasy. I should probably talk to him, but it feels awkward. Can't accuse a friend without cause. Sarah felt a cold dread wash over her as she read. David had noticed. He had felt it too, that same unsettling intuition she had experienced. He had simply, in his characteristic desire to avoid conflict and maintain harmony, dismissed it, suppressed it. It was a mirror of her own actions, a shared burden of blind spots and a misplaced faith in the sanctity of friendship. The journal wasn't an indictment of David, it was a devastating revelation of the shared human tendency to rationalize away the uncomfortable truth, to cling to the illusion of safety even when danger whispers at the periphery. It showed how insidious Mark Jensen's infiltration truly was, how he had exploited not just their financial vulnerabilities, but their psychological ones, their desire to believe in the goodness of others, their reluctance to question a friend. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, not tears of anger, but of profound empathy and shared sorrow. It wasn't about blame anymore, it was about the universal human struggle to discern true intentions from deceptive appearances. She closed the journal, carefully placing it back where she found it. That evening, as David sat quietly reading in his armchair, Sarah walked over and gently took his hand. He looked up, surprised by the gesture, by the raw emotion in her eyes. "I read your journal," she said softly, her voice thick with unshed tears. David's face crumpled, a mask of shame and grief. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I should have listened to you. I should have listened to myself." Sarah squeezed his hand. "No, David. We both made the same mistake. We wanted to believe the best. He exploited that." In that moment, a fragile bridge began to form between them, built not on forgotten pain, but on shared understanding and a renewed, albeit tempered, empathy. It was a small, agonizing step towards healing, towards reclaiming their connection. The path ahead for the Millers remained long and uncertain. Financial recovery was one thing, rebuilding the intricate tapestry of trust, both within their family and with the outside world, was another entirely. They learned that the scars of betrayal don't simply fade, they become a part of you, a constant reminder of vulnerability, a silent teacher. They eventually sold their Crestwood Heights home, the tranquil facade now tainted by too many painful memories, seeking a fresh start in a new community. The move was difficult, severing ties with places and people they had cherished, but it was a necessary step towards shedding the heavy cloak of the past. In their new home, a smaller, more modest dwelling without the grand aspirations of their previous life, they consciously focused on rebuilding. Emily eventually thrived at her local university, finding a new purpose in advocating for victims of financial crime, her personal experience fueling a passionate drive for justice. Thomas, with continued support, slowly regained his boisterous spirit, though a quiet wisdom now resided in his young eyes. Sarah continued her work, her talks on online security and trust becoming increasingly sought after, transforming her personal trauma into a powerful force for public education. David, too, found a new direction, his architectural skills channeled into designing more secure, resilient structures, incorporating smart technologies not just for convenience but for enhanced protection. He sought out projects that focused on community building and resilience, trying to redefine his legacy not by grand, opulent designs, but by contributions that genuinely strengthened the fabric of society. The Millers never truly forgot Mark Jensen, nor the agonizing lessons he had forced upon them. His name would occasionally resurface in conversation, a phantom limb of their past, a stark reminder of the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of profound confidence. But with time, the sharp edges of their pain began to dull. They learned that while trust, once shattered, can never be perfectly reassembled into its original form, it can be rebuilt, painstakingly, piece by piece, into something different, something stronger, more discerning, more resilient. Their journey became a testament to the enduring human capacity for survival, for adaptation, and for finding light even in the deepest shadows of betrayal. They were no longer the naive, trusting family of Crestwood Heights, but survivors, forever marked by their ordeal, yet ultimately defined by their unwavering commitment to rebuild, to heal, and to live with open, albeit guarded, hearts. Their story became a cautionary tale, echoing through the quiet streets of their former community and beyond, a poignant reminder that while danger often lurks in the shadows, sometimes, the most devastating threats emerge from the very heart of trust. Their story became a cautionary tale, echoing through the quiet streets of their former community and beyond, a poignant reminder that while danger often lurks in the shadows, sometimes, the most devastating threats emerge from the very heart of trust. But the echoes of the Miller family's ordeal didn't just fade into the background noise of Crestwood Heights' cautionary whispers. The case of Mark Jensen and the unique sophistication of his cyber-financial scheme caught the attention of federal authorities, transforming what began as a local betrayal into a significant benchmark for national law enforcement agencies grappling with the rapidly evolving landscape of white-collar and cybercrime. Detective Inspector Anya Sharma, whose meticulous investigation had been pivotal in securing Jensen's conviction, found herself unexpectedly propelled into a new role. Her expertise in bridging the gap between traditional policing and the complex intricacies of digital forensics became invaluable. She was seconded to a newly formed FBI task force, Operation Aegis, dedicated to dismantling high-tech financial fraud rings and understanding the psychological profiles of perpetrators like Jensen. It was a dramatic shift from the familiar streets of Crestwood Heights, placing her at the forefront of a nationwide effort to protect unsuspecting citizens from increasingly sophisticated forms of betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on her. The very case that revealed the fragility of trust in a seemingly idyllic community was now forging a new path for its restoration on a larger, systemic scale. The first few months with Operation Aegis were a whirlwind of data analysis, interagency collaborations, and late-night strategy sessions. Sharma, with her practical, street-level policing instincts, often provided a grounding perspective to the predominantly tech-savvy FBI agents and financial analysts. She emphasized the human element, the psychological manipulation, the slow, insidious grooming that Jensen had employed, factors often overlooked in the pursuit of digital footprints and monetary flows. "These aren't just lines of code," she'd often say, pointing to a complex transaction chart. "These are lives being destroyed, families being torn apart by someone they once shared a meal with." Her insights, born from the raw emotional reality of the Miller case, resonated deeply within the task force. One of Operation Aegis's primary objectives was to identify patterns. The Jensen case wasn't an isolated incident. Similar schemes, though varying in their execution and scale, were cropping up across the country. Affluent communities, with their inherent trust and often lax security protocols among neighbors, proved particularly fertile ground for these insider betrayals. The task force began to identify a new breed of financial predator, individuals who, like Jensen, presented impeccable public facades, often held positions of respect or influence, and meticulously cultivated trust as their primary weapon. They were chameleons, blending seamlessly into their chosen environments, studying their targets with chilling patience before striking. The task force's research led them to uncover a disturbing trend. Many of these perpetrators were not career criminals in the traditional sense. They were often highly intelligent, articulate individuals who, for various reasons, gambling addictions, failed businesses, unsustainable lifestyles, or even simply a sense of entitlement, crossed a moral line when faced with financial ruin. What distinguished them was their psychological dexterity, their ability to compartmentalize their actions, to justify their betrayals, and to maintain a convincing performance of friendship and loyalty. Mark Jensen became a critical case study, his meticulous planning and calculated deception forming a blueprint for understanding these complex criminals. While Sharma was immersed in this new world, the Millers continued their quiet work of rebuilding. Sarah's advocacy for online security evolved. She partnered with local banks and credit unions, developing educational workshops designed not just for individuals, but for small business owners and community leaders, emphasizing the importance of recognizing the psychological red flags of financial grooming, not just the technical vulnerabilities. Her message resonated. It's not just about firewalls and antivirus software, it's about understanding human nature, about not letting politeness override your intuition, about setting healthy boundaries even with those you trust. Her lectures became popular, her clear, empathetic delivery transforming her painful experience into a powerful tool for prevention. She even authored a small e-book, The Trojan Horse of Trust, which gained significant traction in the online security community. David, having channeled his architectural talents into security-conscious design, found himself approached by various institutions looking to harden their physical and digital perimeters. He started consulting for high-net-worth individuals and corporations, designing secure environments that integrated cutting-edge technology with discreet, almost invisible, protective measures. His work wasn't just about deterring external threats, but about creating systems that could detect and flag anomalies that might indicate an internal compromise. He became adept at identifying blind spots, not just in security camera coverage, but in human systems, in the unsuspecting routines and unguarded assumptions that often paved the way for sophisticated breaches. His quiet resolve had transformed into a professional mission, finding purpose in preventing others from enduring what his family had suffered. Emily, at university, excelled in her studies, pursuing a degree in criminal justice with a specialization in forensic accounting. Her youthful idealism, though tempered by betrayal, had crystallized into a fierce determination to understand and combat financial malfeasance. She joined a student volunteer group that helped low-income families navigate complex financial forms and avoid scams, applying her burgeoning knowledge to practical community aid. She found solace and strength in empowering others, turning her family's victimhood into a catalyst for positive change. She often called her mother, discussing new developments in cybersecurity, sharing insights from her courses, their shared trauma now a bridge for intellectual and emotional connection. Thomas is years older now, still carried the faint echoes of betrayal, but had blossomed into a thoughtful, empathetic young man. His early struggles had imbued him with a deep understanding of human fragility and the importance of integrity. He gravitated towards subjects that fostered connection and understanding, eventually envisioning a career in social work or psychology. He learned that while bad things happen, they don't have to define you. He saw his parents, scarred but resilient, and drew strength from their arduous journey of healing and transformation. Back at Operation Aegis, Sharma's team had begun to piece together a larger network. The encrypted logs found on Mark Jensen's hidden laptop, initially dismissed as personal notes, contained faint, almost untraceable references to an online forum, a clandestine digital marketplace where individuals facing financial ruin could anonymously seek consultation on high-yield, low-risk schemes to acquire capital. It was a dark web haven for the desperate, a twisted incubator for financial predators. Jensen, it turned out, hadn't entirely acted in isolation. He was a product of this digital ecosystem, an amateur who had learned from others, perhaps even been guided by more experienced players operating in the shadows. This discovery opened a Pandora's box. The forum, codenamed the Phoenix Project by its anonymous administrators, promised resurrection from financial ashes through creative asset reallocation, a euphemism for sophisticated fraud. Its members exchanged tactics, shared templates for malware, discussed psychological manipulation techniques, and even offered encrypted channels for money laundering. It was a chilling testament to the Internet's capacity to facilitate not just connection, but organized, anonymous malevolence. Sharma and her team realized they were dealing with something far more complex than individual cases of betrayal. This was an emerging subculture of white-collar crime, enabled by anonymity and fueled by desperation, preying on the very fabric of trust in communities across the globe. They began the arduous process of infiltrating the Phoenix Project, a dangerous game of digital cat and mouse that required extreme caution and state-of-the-art cyberforensics. They knew that one wrong move could tip off the administrators, causing the entire network to vanish into the digital ether. The investigation stretched on for another year, demanding relentless dedication and innovative techniques. Sharma found herself often thinking of the Millers, of the human cost of these abstract digital crimes. Their faces, their pain, their resilience, became her driving force. She understood that bringing down the Phoenix Project wouldn't just be a victory against faceless criminals, it would be a symbolic act of justice for every family like the Millers, who had their lives shattered by a predator wearing a mask of friendship. The climax of Operation Aegis arrived during a meticulously planned global sting operation. Working with Interpol and other international law enforcement agencies, the task force simultaneously executed warrants in 6 different countries, targeting the alleged administrators and key members of the Phoenix Project. The busts were massive, leading to dozens of arrests and the seizure of vast amounts of cryptocurrency, illicit funds, and sophisticated hacking tools. Among those arrested was a shadowy figure known only as the Architect, the presumed mastermind behind the forum, a former financial sector analyst with a genius-level IQ and a deep-seated resentment for the system he believed had failed him. His real name was Elias Thorne, and his online persona was a chilling echo of David Miller's architectural profession, another layer of dark irony. The global takedown of the Phoenix Project set shockwaves through the dark web, disrupting countless ongoing fraud schemes and sending a clear message to would-be predators. Detective Inspector Anya Sharma, now widely recognized as a leading expert in her field, had played an instrumental role. Her unique blend of traditional policing and an acute understanding of human psychology had been the key to unraveling the seemingly impenetrable network. She returned to her original jurisdiction briefly, celebrated as a hero, but the experience had changed her irrevocably. She had stared into the abyss of organized digital betrayal and helped to pull back its veil. For the Millers, the news of the Phoenix Project's dismantling and the arrest of the Architect came as a distant, yet profoundly resonant, affirmation. While they had no direct connection to Elias Thorne, they understood implicitly that their ordeal with Mark Jensen was part of a larger, more sinister tapestry. Sarah felt a surge of validation, seeing her personal pain transformed into a systemic victory. David, learning of the Architect's background, felt a cold chill, recognizing the intellectual arrogance that could twist brilliance into destructive malevolence. It underscored how close they had come to something even more dangerous, something larger than just Mark Jensen's individual desperation. The Millers' story, once a deeply personal tragedy, had inadvertently become a catalyst for change. Their pain had contributed to the development of new law enforcement strategies, influenced public awareness campaigns, and even inspired a new generation of professionals dedicated to protecting against the very kind of betrayal they had experienced. They were no longer just victims, they were unwitting pioneers, their journey illuminating a darker corner of the modern world and paving the way for greater security and vigilance. Years passed. Crestwood Heights, though forever marked by the Jensen scandal, slowly began to heal. New families moved in, unaware of the subtle shift in the community's collective psyche. The Millers visited occasionally, for a friend's wedding or a community event, but their old home held no allure. It was a place where their innocence had been lost, and while they had rebuilt, the foundation of their lives was now rooted elsewhere, in a stronger, more resilient soil. Sarah continued her advocacy, her message evolving from simply warning about scams to emphasizing the importance of community, of watchful care for one another, but always with a healthy dose of discerning skepticism. She taught people to trust their instincts, to question what felt off, and to empower themselves with knowledge. David's security consultancy flourished, his designs now recognized globally for their innovative blend of protection and human-centric living. His work became a philosophical statement: security wasn't about building walls, but about creating intelligent systems that fostered trust while remaining vigilant. Emily, after completing her degree, joined a non-profit organization dedicated to combating online fraud, working closely with law enforcement and financial institutions. She was tenacious, brilliant, and deeply committed, her personal history shaping her into a powerful advocate for justice. Thomas, true to his early inclinations, pursued a career in counseling, helping individuals and families navigate trauma and rebuild trust. He understood, from a profound personal place, the long, winding road to healing. The Millers, as a family, were a living testament to resilience. Their scars remained, faint but visible, a reminder of the darkness they had faced. But these scars were not symbols of weakness, they were badges of survival, of wisdom earned through adversity. They had learned that trust, while essential, was also a profound responsibility, something to be given cautiously and nurtured fiercely. They understood that the world was indeed full of shadows, but also that within themselves, and in their renewed connection, they possessed an unwavering light. Their story, once a harrowing tale of betrayal, had transformed into an epic of human perseverance, a quiet triumph over the insidious forces that seek to dismantle the very bonds that hold society together. The legacy of Mark Jensen was a cautionary tale, but the legacy of the Millers was one of enduring hope, of the unwavering strength found in rebuilding, not just homes, but lives, trust, and the very spirit of community, one discerning, open heart at a time. The echoes of Crestwood Heights resonated not with fear, but with the quiet courage of those who had learned to navigate the new landscape of trust and betrayal, emerging stronger, wiser, and more united than before.